let's talk through all the easy DIY and budget-friendly decor I made for our wedding. Okay, so let's start off with bridesmaid proposal boxes. So I created proposal boxes for all of my bridesmaids, my maid of honor, as well as my flower girl. Personally, when I receive bridesmaid things and it says it all over the place, I know I'm only going to be using it for that time frame. And then I probably won't take it out in public, at least if it says bridesmaid all over the place and it's not like the bachelorette party or something. So I didn't want the girls that I was asking to be put in the same position. So I was really conscious to pick items with personalizations that were just of their names. That all being said, I ordered some jewelry case boxes off of Etsy and I had them personalized to say each person's name on the front. I thought it would be a cute idea so that people can use it for the morning of the wedding if they had to transport jewelry, or for the bachelorette, or just, you know, travel trips in general. So that was sort of the main thing that I got. And then I also put in a scrunchie in as close to the bridesmaid dress color as possible. So I'd actually seen on Etsy a bunch of people were selling these scrunchies with a tag on them that said something cute. The one that I ended up going with was to have and to hold your hair back. But they had a couple other ones I can't quite recall right now, but if you search on Etsy, I'm sure you'll see a ton of them. Basically, I saw those on Etsy and I really liked them, but they were quite pricey for me. So instead, I ordered a bunch of scrunchies off of Amazon in the color that I wanted. So in my case, like a burgundy wine color. And I got a whole set of them, and then I made a template on Canva for the to have and to hold sort of tag. So once I had the template, I printed it out on cardstock so that it was a little bit sturdier over paper. Then once I had it printed, I cut it out, and so it's basically these like long strips of paper. So it says to have and to hold at the top, and then the bottom is just a strip of blank paper. So I then took that side and I wove it through the scrunchie and then stapled it on top so it stayed together and it looked like a little tag. So that was super easy, way less expensive than ordering it on Etsy and having someone else do that whole thing. And then the last thing I had in the box was just a printed out card asking, will you be my bridesmaid or will you be my maid of honor? There was a template on Canva for this exact thing, so I just used that, filled it out appropriately, and printed it out on my own printer. So I think it worked really well. I just put that on top, closed the box, and then I had a gold champagne-ish colored ribbon, and I just tied the box shut and it was good to go. So in terms of the flower girl proposal box, it was very similar. I used the same type of box, the same paper confetti on the bottom, but then I also ordered a shirt off of Etsy that said flower girl, but it was very 70s-esque. It had the wavy writing. I didn't feel that the shirt was strictly like flower girl, wedding flower girl, because it seemed 70s-esque and like flower girl, flowers in your hair type of thing. It seemed like something she could wear actually again if she wanted to. So I opted for that, and then I also got these flower shaped sunglasses off of Amazon for super cheap. They're meant for little girls. They were adorable. So I just popped that in the box as well, put the cover on, tied it up with a ribbon, and we were good to go. Okay, so moving on to signage, we had tons of signs for our wedding, as do most weddings for some reason, and I DIY'd them all. Signs are one of the easiest things to DIY in my opinion, so if you're looking to save money, this is definitely a place to do it. I will say that I know a lot of people opt to use a Cricut for a lot of the wedding signs. I do actually own a Cricut now, but I didn't own one until literally like a month or two before I got married. So the majority of the things I made were without my own Cricut. So I do have a bunch of tips and tricks if you don't have a Cricut and you're looking to make signs like this. So the first solution is to use Etsy. I definitely utilized this before I had a Cricut. I had a bunch of stuff printed on Etsy in various sizes, and I would say it's pretty cheap too, depending on the size of the text that you need. But I can tell you it's significantly cheaper than if you were to order a full-on sign from an Etsy seller. Doing it yourself this way, even with paying for the text, is definitely much cheaper. So some of the signs I actually made were a welcome sign. So this was a black acrylic board I ordered off of Amazon, and then the Cricut text on top that I stuck down. This was pretty easy to do. If you just watch a couple videos on how people properly stick it down, you'll be fine. So another thing I made with Cricut text was this mirror sign. So our mirror sign was on this beautiful mirror that I picked up as just a mirror I wanted for our home in general, and I then doubled its purpose and used it as this little selfie moment. So the decal stickers that went on this sign I actually ordered off of Etsy, like I explained previously. So it said, "Damn, you look good" in one corner, and then on the bottom it said, "See you on the dance floor." It looks beautiful, and now I have the mirror for myself. I can just take the stickers off and use it in my own home. So I would definitely suggest thinking about that if you're going to be buying a bunch of things to use as signs or whatever for your wedding, I would definitely consider dual purposes so that you're not just stuck with a bunch of things after the wedding is over. At least you can have things that you actually do like and can use for other things throughout your home or for another party, whatever it may be. I would definitely keep that in mind. So another sign I made was an unplugged ceremony sign. I will say nobody really acknowledged the sign, I guess, because everybody had their phones out, but if you are choosing to do this as well, it was a really simple thing for me to do. I actually got a clear acrylic board and then I printed out my text that I wanted it to say in as large as I wanted it to be. I printed it out and put it behind the board and then sort of traced the lettering with a paint marker. So that's how I had it initially, but then when I did end up eventually getting a Cricut right before the wedding, I decided to remake it last minute. I was worried that the clear sign wouldn't be as noticeable in the church because I didn't really have a background ledge to put it on. It was just gonna be like everybody in the background. So I think if I hadn't gotten a Cricut and wanted to fix this, I would have just painted the back of the acrylic board so that it was opaque and not see-through. Because that was really the main thing I was concerned about. Otherwise, it worked totally fine. So you can definitely do that as well. So the rest of the signs were really for like table numbers, the signature drinks, or any additional thing that we had that we wanted people to be aware of. So like in our case, we had disposable film cameras. So I had a sign explaining how to use them and where to put them when you're done. And then we also had an audio guest book because that also required instructions. We had a sign for that as well. So for all of those, we ended up just using frames that I thrifted. So I thrifted a ton of frames. We were trying to find ones that were gold. So I did find a bunch that were like that. But otherwise, if I found frames with really pretty detailing, I just took those home from the thrift store and spray painted them gold. So there are definitely ways to make everything work and it was super cost effective. So I'm really glad that we just thrifted all of them rather than buying a ton of them because we really did use a ton of them. So if you're looking for frames for your wedding, I definitely suggest checking out the thrift store and finding some cheap options or finding some really pretty detailing ones that you can turn into frames that you're looking for if they're not the right color. So for all of those signs that I just mentioned that were in frames, I just used Canva to create the actual content that was going in the frame. Etsy has a million templates for anything wedding related, so I would definitely check that out if you're in the market for some. We got our signature drink template off of Etsy, so I just downloaded the template from them, customized it as I needed, and then printed it out. I did actually print them out on photo paper before putting them in the frames, just because I thought it would be a little bit more elevated, but you can definitely print it on any other paper if you don't want to use photo paper as well. I know it's really easy to get hung up on the details of things like that, of like what type of paper to use, but reality is no one's really gonna notice when it's inside of a frame sitting at the middle of the table. They're gonna be way too distracted. No one's gonna say, oh my God, is that cardstock and not photo paper? Like, and if they do, kick them out because that's crazy. So the other big sign that we had at our wedding was this sip and solve. It was actually a very last minute addition that we made. So we had this during our cocktail hour, just in case like there was a lull and maybe people didn't all know each other. So the sip and solve is basically a giant crossword puzzle that you can personalize with questions about yourself or your family, the groom's family. So again, this was a template that we got off of Etsy. We got the crossword puzzle printed at our local Staples on really big paper, and we had a really big frame to go with it. So then we had these dry erase markers that we sort of attached to the frame with like a little sticker thing. And so guests were able to use those whiteboard markers to write on the glass of the frame to fill out the boxes. Our venue provided those giant easels, so we had it sitting on one of those, as did our welcome sign actually. But it was really easy, really fun, and like I said, at the end of the night, it was completed and people seemed to have a blast with it. So I would definitely suggest that if you're looking for a little something extra to do. It's definitely not necessary, but it was a good time. So moving on to centerpieces, we had a bunch of garland that we made. All of the greenery that we used for our centerpieces were from Trader Joe's. You can order ahead of time and they'll make sure to have as much as you need in stock when you come in to pick it up. It's super cost effective if you're looking for a place to get some greenery or flowers without spending thousands and thousands of dollars, because florals can be crazy amounts of money. So we ended up getting 2 different types of eucalyptus from Trader Joe's. So we had like silver dollar, and then I forgot what the regular one is, but it's like the sort of potato skewer looking one. I don't know, I'll put up a picture. We had those 2 types of eucalyptus, and then we also got baby's breath as well. I watched a bunch of videos on how to do this greenery garland so that I would know what I was doing, and I definitely tried it ahead of time before I had to make it for the wedding. So I learned and did some practice ones, and then the day before the wedding I had a bunch of friends help me out. I totally understand why people spend lots of money paying other people to do it, because it's definitely a lot of work. But if you're up for the challenge and you have people that'll help you, it's not so terrible. So the concept for the centerpieces was to have greenery garland in the center. We had round tables, so the garland was going to be just a giant circle. And then inside of that circle would be the table number and then some candles around it. Our sweetheart table was a small rectangle, so instead of having a circular garland for that, we had one that just draped across the edge and was a bit longer. So because we dropped off our centerpieces the day before, we needed to make sure that the greenery would stay fresh. So the eucalyptus and baby's breath didn't really have an issue being out that long. I had tested this ahead of time, and it has, you know, like 2-3 days before it starts to look brown and get gross. So I wasn't worried about that at all. But for our sweetheart table, we added hydrangea to our garland, and that was definitely going to start wilting. So in order for the hydrangea to stay fresh overnight, I had bought these little plastic stems that you can fill with water, and there's like a little cap that goes on top so the water's not spilling everywhere. And basically you just feed the stem of the flower through that so it's in the water and can stay hydrated. It's not like a long-term solution, but for a short little period like that, it definitely can work. So if you're looking for a solution in that regard, definitely consider checking that out. So the next thing I wanted to mention were our favors. Our favors were these cute Lucky 7 lotto tickets because we actually got married on the 7th. Prior to that, we started dating on Friday the 13th. In America, Friday the 13th is considered really unlucky, and then 7 is a really lucky number, so there was a whole theme around that. They were super affordable. They were $1 each. I had ordered these cute little bags from Etsy that said for richer or poorer, and then in parentheses, hopefully richer. But you can customize it to say the date of your wedding, however you want it to be. So I had gotten those bags, and then to seal them, I had gotten a bunch of pennies from friends and family who had really shiny pennies. I was on the lookout for pennies that were shiny for a really long time. I actually tried cleaning pennies, but it's totally not worth it. It worked, but it definitely wasn't worth it. Like, friends had way shinier pennies than I had, so I would definitely suggest reaching out to the people in your circles and seeing if they have shinier ones, if this is something you're trying to do as well. But basically I had gotten all these pennies and then little glue dots to put on the back of them and seal it shut. So it looks like this, and it's super cute. People loved it. Obviously people can take the penny off of the bag to use to scratch off the lotto ticket. So people were doing that throughout the night, and it was lots of fun. There were a couple instances where people won on the lotto tickets, but instead of keeping it, they put it in our card box, which was really sweet. So I think it overall was a really great idea, and I'm so happy that we went with it. And if we had lots of leftovers, it was lotto tickets, so it's not like we're stuck with a million different like wine glasses or something. So then, just to talk about stationery items for a minute, we made our own invitations, our own menu cards, seating cards, and obviously thank you cards. The only reason I wanted to mention our invitations is because we used a little QR code for people to RSVP to, rather than mailing in a separate little RSVP card specifically, which I think saved us a ton on postage, obviously, because normally you have to provide a little stamp for people to mail it back to. So we used the Knot for our wedding website, and they have a really cool feature where you can add an RSVP page. So we used that and then generated a QR code that was going to link to that RSVP page, and you just type in your name. So basically it brings up everybody associated with your group so that you know exactly how many people are accounted for. So this doesn't give guests the opportunity to sort of write in how many people they're bringing. It's just, this is what you were given. Yes or no, are you coming? I feel like that specifically is really beneficial, and it avoids any sort of arguing, because if you're curious if you had a +1, it says you have a +1. And if you don't have a +1, it's just you and you don't have a text box to write in and be like, can you please give me a +1? They'll have to come to you directly. Another thing I wanted to mention is that through this RSVP feature, you can also send an automated text to everybody who has an RSVP'd when it's close to the deadline, so it'll contact everybody individually. You're able to customize the message that gets sent out, but it's auto-distributed, which I think is really helpful, because obviously people sometimes need an additional reminder, and I can't imagine having sent out invitations where people have to mail it back to you and then wondering if maybe it got lost in the mail or if they just forgot to do it. Like, I feel like this was such an easy way to get it done. So if that's something that you're considering, I definitely suggest doing it. I feel like it saved a ton of time. It was super easy to keep track of, and the Knots website made that so easy for us. So the last thing I wanted wanted to mention were our seating cards. I know there are various different methods to do a seating chart or seating cards. You can go above and beyond as much as you want. We chose personally to keep it really simple. We didn't want to spend an additional amount of money on seating cards when people are just going to throw them out anyways. We used a website called placecard.me to automate them all. So basically you submit an Excel file with everybody's name and the table number that you want them to be noted as, and it just sort of spits everything out onto a template that you can just print out and then cut and fold. It's super easy to use. I ended up buying some creamy ivory colored cardstock to print it on. By all means, if you want to go the wax seal route with the dried flowers or do all the fancy things with your seating cards, go for it. It just wasn't something that we wanted to spend extra money on. So we opted to save in that regard, do it ourselves at home, and then spend that money elsewhere. So I think that's about everything that I DIY'd and made for our wedding. I'm sure I'm forgetting some things, but that covers the majority of it. I hope this video was helpful in giving you some inspiration for your own wedding, or maybe a friend's, a sibling's, whoever it may be. Personally, I like to watch this type of content before I even had a boyfriend, never mind was engaged. So if that's you as well, you're more than welcome here. I hope you got some ideas for the future, and thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.